It's time to talk about Benjamin Sesko. Welcome back to In Focus, everyone. This is the series throughout the summer where we're going to be talking about players that are linked to the transfer move to Arsenal and talk about why, do a little bit of scouting on them as well, bring some data and give some thoughts as to why Arsenal may be pursuing moves for these players. Benjamin Sesko, we've heard from so many journalists now, is a player that Arsenal really like. In this video, we're going to talk about why. I did actually do a video on Benjamin Sesko on my own personal channel where I talked about some interesting data that popped up. But the more I've watched him, because since then I've watched even more of him, I've tried to get a better understanding for the player, and I like him a lot more than I actually did when I first did a breakdown on the player. And I'm going to explain in this video why. Let's start with his player profile. Because he's 21 years old, he's 6'5", he's right-footed, he's Slovenian, so we will see him up against England at the Euros, and he's actually played for two professional clubs already, RB Salzburg, and he is currently at RB Leipzig at the age of 21. So he's a young player who's played at two pro clubs, which, when I say pro clubs, I mean, you know, he's played professional football at two clubs, which would make you probably think, okay, so he's pretty experienced and well-versed for a player of his age. That's why I'm just going to very quickly come in with my main negative of the player. There's so many positives I'll go through. But one of my main concerns when it comes to spending a lot of money on a striker that we have all felt for a while is a big position for Arsenal to fill. This is a very inexperienced player we'd be turning to, and I've got some data to prove it. He only started 50% of Bundesliga games for Leipzig this season. This is also his only season at Leipzig so far. They did sign him a good, a good year before they actually got him. He did stay at RB Salzburg. But he only played 50% or started 50% of Bundesliga games. He started 50% of Champions League games, and he started 50% of DFB Pokal games, which is the cup competition. So essentially, there's not one competition where he's actually been able to get more minutes than another. It's not exactly that, you know, being a young player, they've played him more in sort of other areas than maybe the key competitions like the Champions League. He's basically just been a player that they've used fairly in and out the 11 when it comes to at least starting games. Now I've got more data on this because 14 of his 17 starts came in the last 18 games of the season. So he started 17 games in total in the Bundesliga. It's a 34-game league, and 14 of those came in the last 18 games of the season, so pretty much all in the second half of the campaign. 12 of those 14 starts he was actually substituted in. So of the 14 starts we're talking about, 12 of them he was actually substituted in as well, didn't complete the whole game, and in fact 15 of his total 17 starts have ended in substitutions. So he's only played a full 90 twice. That is really important to know, because while he's played 31 out of 34 Bundesliga games, he averages 44 minutes per game. So I really just want to stress this point, people, that okay, this is a young player who there's a lot of promise, a lot of the big clubs want him, but he is inexperienced. He was at Salzburg. Yes, he got some first team minutes there. He then got the big move to Leipzig that obviously people were very excited about. Man United were looking at him at the time. Arsenal were also looking at him at the time before he made the move to Leipzig to play in German football. But even in this season, it's taken a while for them to bed him. Now, it is his first full season, so it would take a while to bed him in. But a lot of his football came at the end of the season, and when you actually look at the amount he's played in total, it's not really that much when you're talking about, you know, being a goal scorer and a striker in one of Europe's top leagues. But there are lots of positives that come with little football. Firstly, actually he's played 20 Champions League games already. For RB Salzburg, he got games there too in the Champions League, so he's pretty comfortable with European football. Leipzig were knocked out by Real Madrid in the Champions League. I don't think he really left his mark in that game, but he is clearly used to playing against Europeans elite and playing in that competition, and his scoring rate is superb. Let's have a little look at his last three seasons, two of them at Salzburg, where in 24 games, 30 games and 31 games for this season against Leipzig, this is just the league season, may I add, he scored 5 goals with 3 assists, 16 goals with 4 assists and 14 goals with 2 assists. That last figure, as you can see there, his full numbers for his league campaign at Leipzig. So 14 goals and 2 assists for someone who is averaging 44 minutes a game is really not that bad. And this is why I say, just because he's not playing a lot of football doesn't mean that that's a piece of data you take necessarily negatively. There is a lot of positives in that as well, because let me show you this graphic here. If you look at the best young strikers in Europe, and by the way, this is all everyone will have different opinions on this, right? I've just gone for players that have been linked with the move to Arsenal, young players that have been doing well, and I've also gone for 3 players that are really highly talked about the season before and actually got moves because of their really good form. What we've got here is their minutes per goal. How many minutes on average do they play before a goal is scored by them and goes in the back of the net? Benjamin Sesko in the 23-24 campaign, which just passed, averaged a goal every 109 minutes. Only Santiago Jimenez of Feyenoord has a better rate with 104 minutes played per every goal scored. Brobbey of Ajax, he's in good form, as is Xerxes, but they're getting 134 minutes of football under their belt per goal scored, 252 minutes for Xerxes as well. And Højlund, as you can see at Atalanta, before his move to Man United, was getting 204 minutes per goal, 217 this season for Man United, Ferguson 158 and 227, and Gonzalo Ramos, who also got a big move from Benfica to PSG, 121 and 129 minutes per goal. Now this is really interesting because Højlund and Ramos went for big money. Ferguson's being talked about as a £100 million player potentially, and the other 3 players, except for really Jimenez, have all been linked with moves to Arsenal as well. And Sesko stands head and shoulders above everyone except for Jimenez, whose output has been really good this season. And that just tells you that, okay, he might not be the most experienced, but if we're talking about a player who can play out on the left, can play out on the right, and because he's got the pace too, I mean, we haven't really talked about his strengths either, we'll get to those in a sec, but he's a very quick player. And if you've got a player who is young, strikers really peak at 25 onwards, and Havertz is in good form, end of the season in good form, and will still want to play a lot of football. You've got a player there in Sesko who you can develop, not just up front, but can play out wide if he needs minutes too, can come in and out the team, and actually has proven that he doesn't need to be playing all the time for him to be quite prolific and quite efficient with the chance he gets. And his making use of the little time he has is supported by some FBref numbers, because as we can see, he ranks really high. As you can see, the more green, the higher the bar, the better you are on the percentile ranking. It's ranking how he is for particular stats amongst other Bundesliga strikers. And as you can see, obviously goals, very good per 90, but shots on target per 90, at 53.2%. Goals per shot as well is very good. Goals per shot on target is very good. His goals minus XG, he ranks very highly. There's a lot of stats there. Feel free to hit the pause button if you want to look at it in more detail. But as you can see, a player who's clearly very efficient in front of goal. But this is where the eye test is fascinating, because I'm going to come to my next set of stats, and I'm going to tell you more about what I've seen of him as a player compared to what the stats are necessarily telling me. But let's keep going through, because if you look at his passing numbers for FBref, again, it's kind of the complete opposite. They don't look great. I talked about this on my channel. He doesn't look like he's a particularly effective passer of a football, that he's particularly technically secure in possession, that he's going to be the kind of player Arteta would like, because Arteta likes players, no matter where you're on the pitch, you've got to be able to look after the ball. It's the reason Aubameyang didn't make it as a striker under Arteta, really, and he preferred a Lacazette and then signing a Jesus and now Havertz, because these players are really good at looking after the ball, and with every player, they've only got better and better at it. These are players who look after the ball, and it's kind of possession first. Like, yes, I need to score goals, yes, I need to take risks, but I need to get that decision making right. I need to be able to look after the ball in tight spaces, because strikers always drop deep in Arteta and Arsenal system to try and combine in the midfield too. So technical security, being a good passer, linking up with the wingers is really important, and this data would tell you that he's not particularly good at it. But let me show you this. Here are some FBref numbers. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but you can see it there. Defensive numbers aren't great, are they? I mean, apart from doing quite well on challenges lost and errors, it's a pretty poor set, not pressing massively, or at least winning tackles in the attacking third. Dribblers tackled isn't great. Just tackles in general, passes blocked, tackles at interceptions. It doesn't look great, right? So why am I showing you this? It's not Sesko's numbers. Before you all think it's not Sesko's numbers. These are Kai Havertz's defensive numbers. And the reason I'm showing you this is because Kai Havertz, if you ask any Arsenal fan, however much you kind of rate or don't rate the player, I think most would agree that his work rate's been pretty spot on. And Kai Havertz has been someone who's been really praised by analysts of the game who sort of really know what they're talking about with this kind of stuff, as someone who his work rate's been brilliant, his commitment in duels, his ability to press, his positioning is superb. He leads the line really well off the ball for Arsenal. And even when he's played in midfield, even though I felt he's lacked something as a left-sided number 8 for us, I've never questioned his duel winning and his sort of throwing himself about and his using his height and his presence and his aerial ability. He's always been really good in that sense. And yet FBref numbers tell me that his numbers aren't that, he's actually not that great defensively. So the reason I'm showing you this is because it works both ways. As good as Sesko's attacking numbers are, and as bad as his passing numbers are, just from a pure looking at a grass perspective, Sesko will be playing in a system that requires him to do certain things, and every team will be affected, or every player will be affected by that in some way or another. Havertz's defensive numbers might not be great because Arsenal have so much of the ball. We keep teams pinned in so often. We're really good at controlling areas of the pitch, and Havertz might be really good when we do watch him getting involved in defensive numbers, or defensive actions. But the reality is he doesn't have to do it that much, and that might be true of Sesko. That it might be true that we're looking at a player whose defensive passing numbers, shall I say, aren't great because he's not had to be involved in build-up that much. He plays in a 4-4-2. I think it's Xavi Simons, I'm going to go Simons. And Dani Olmo can play a sort of two floating 10/wide players. He's got Openda next to him. So there's a lot of other players then. Sesko maybe doesn't have to get involved in all that. But that's just me giving the other side of it. Here's what I feel having watched the player, watched lots of highlights, looked at his best moments, looked at different attributes of him. Here's my sort of takeaway from him. I think when everyone says he's raw, I agree. He's a very raw player. I definitely see that. But he's very exciting back to goal. He's able to look after the ball and turn and run into space. He wants to take players on. He's not just a big man who wants to get a touch and roll it into, midfielder and then spin off the defender. He actually is happy to turn, drive, carry the ball. He's happy to take players on. He's happy to, attack what's in front of him. If the pass isn't on, he'll go, all right, well, I'll go at it alone. When the ball falls to him in the penalty area, he's not always just looking for the shot immediately. Sometimes he does, but he's happy to take a touch, try to take around defender and work a better angle for himself. I will say, though, for all those positives, I've also seen someone who does look a little erratic in front of goal, has at times lashed at chances. Now, this is a 21-year-old striker. When I was watching the comps, they were from when he was a 20-year-old in this last season. He's only developed more. He's only really played half a season in one of Europe's top 5 leagues. So we have to be patient. But the question then goes to all of you, but mainly to Arteta and Edu. Do you want a player who you can develop and work with, who's got all the raw ingredients, will get better and better, or do you want the guy who fires us to the title now? Despite me really liking what I'm seeing from him in terms of his willingness to kind of take responsibility, get the ball, run at players, he's actually got quite a decent range of passing I've seen from his comps. He can play a little chip ball into the corners. He can, find a through ball. He can play through the lines. He does seem to be able to have the technical ability to do those things. Whether he always executes it or not is another question. But the question is, do you want someone you can work with those raw ingredients with, or do you want someone who's going to fire to the title now? And I just don't think he's going to fire us to the title now. But my word, does he look a really, really promising player. And if we were to get him and really, really add something on the wings and specifically in central midfield, I'd be okay with that because he certainly looks like someone who could do a job as well. I also just want to add by just talking about the tactical pad really, really quickly and how he differs slightly to Kai Havertz because it's a really small thing. But I think we've seen that Kai Havertz, especially when he's been on the end of long balls from Raya, has been able to flick it on and then combine in these areas of the pitch. Whereas I think Sesko, from what I've watched anyway, seems to want to drift more to that side. If the ball goes long, I think someone like Martinelli would benefit a lot from Sesko wanting to receive the ball in this area as well. Dare I add Zinchenko as well? Can we add Zinchenko to it? Yeah, let's get Zinchenko in. I mean, if Zinchenko is inverting, getting the ball here, Sesko might be the kind of target man you can get into feet if he does lean more to the left. I think because of his pace, willingness to run at players, he probably does want to do that out on the left-hand side. And I think Jesus, when Zinchenko was at his best, Jesus was doing a similar thing. But let's just quickly look at a couple other things as well that just support this. As we can see his heat map here, he does seem to lean slightly more to the left. I mean, I see a lot more orange and red there on the left than I see on the right. So there is a little bit more of a bias there. Whereas as you see with the Bournemouth home game, no, let's get rid of that. As you can see with the Bournemouth home game, this is Kai Havertz's heat map. He did lean slightly more to the right, actually quite significantly more to the right in that game at home against Bournemouth. He played really well in that game. And may I add, if you look at his other heat maps, Tottenham, Man United, I think the Chelsea one too, he was always leaning more to the right. in that game as well. So he has a slightly different bias, I think, Havertz, in terms of the area he wants to run into and try and combine with Sesko. So maybe someone like Martinelli or Zinchenko would benefit from this move. All right, everyone, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on Benjamin Sesko. Do you want him at the club? It'd take about £55 million, it looks like, in terms of a release clause, and we are hearing, or reports are saying, should I say, making it sound like I'm an ITK there, reports are saying that it's going to be a couple weeks / maybe the end of the Euros if Slovenia, and they might do, but if they don't get out the group stage, then perhaps straight after the Euros we'll have a conclusion on his future and what he's doing, because he has been in talks apparently with Man United and Chelsea, as well as Arsenal and Leipzig have offered him a contract. So we'll wait and see what happens. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe to AFTV for more updates on all things transfers throughout the summer. See you soon.